was but contrary to what Rich says, it was definitely a group effort for our So I'm lucky to have our three panelists today here. Like Rich mentioned, this is going to be all about green energy. We're going to try as best we can to bring things to the Middleborough, the Middleborough and the state level, so that some of it hits home directly for us, but also we can kind of find out what's going on in our state as well. So I'd like to introduce our panelists. Starting in the middle, Kimberly. Hope you don't mind if I read from this. Kimberly French is the leader of the climate justice team at the First UU Society of Middleborough, which has been advocating for state climate policy for the past year. She's also the chair of the Middleborough Community Preservation Committee and a lay ministry visitor to prisoners at the Massachusetts Correctional Complex in Bridgewater. Kimberly is a contributing editor and columnist of the Unitarian Universalist World magazine, where she's written about immigration, modern slavery, humans' relationships to animals, eating crickets, hopefulness, and young women, and many other topics. She is currently working with the City of Cambridge on writing guidelines for practicing urban agriculture. So then next we have Jeff Stevens on the left here. Jeff is a former teacher and principal in Middleborough for 36 combined years, is that right? And has held positions in Middleborough Public Schools of energy manager and recycling coordinator. He's also a founding member and director of the Friends of the Middleborough Cemeteries, which actually you can see an awful lot of stuff around this room from that group. So thanks for your work on that. See, I lost my place here. Due to his tendency as a local history nut who is interested in Middleborough gravestones, I guess self-admitted.
Yes.
In addition, he's a Soul Farm Education Center officer and board member. However, Jeff comes to us today as the chairman of the Green Energy Committee here in Middleborough. And then, last but not least, on the right side is Evan. Evan Melillo is the assistant town manager at Middleborough, a role that he started in December 2015. After graduating in May of that year with a master's degree in public administration from UMass Dartmouth, which also we just learned we went to the same school, not necessarily at the same year, but also I think what's important about Evan's participation on here is that also he has an interest in environmental policy, and he got a certificate during his master's in that line. Before coming to Middleborough, Evan was an administrative analyst in the Dartmouth Town Manager's Office for 2 years. Preceded by a paid fellowship. Oops, I forgot to take that part out, sorry. That's fine. Not that it's unimportant. No. Evan is dedicated to public service. I think if you watch him, you'll learn that. He's very interested in renewable energy and is described as crazy for solar. When I saw his boss at the Herring Run Festival this past weekend by Robert Nunes, town manager. In addition, Evan has been involved in several renewable initiatives in town, including a recently funded, this is very new news, I think, the double axis array at the water treatment facility on 28, is that right?
Now I'm going to cross this whole part
out.
Sorry.
No, I would still say the recently passed at town meeting community solar array, which I imagine we'll probably talk more about today, off of Chestnut Street, and the addition of, is this right, 12 town-owned plug-in vehicles. Yep. All right. So we'd love to get participation from you guys. So I think what I'm going to start off by doing is having each panelist talk about themselves a little bit and what they're into, and then it'd be great after they're done with their introductions, please just raise your hand. And if things get too in the weeds, I'll jump in to pull us back on track. But otherwise, let's just keep the dialogue going. Okay. So you want to start on the left here, Jeff?
That's all right. Fine. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out this morning. Green Energy Committee is what I'm going to speak about right now, though I do encourage you to take a look at our cemeteries. Amazing history things here and all kinds of other interesting possibilities around town. Green Energy Committee came along about 2011 as a town committee, so it came from the selectmen who established it in the first place. Early activities predominantly involved trying to think about alternative ways to generate energy than just buying it off the wires that we see all over the place, and also about improving energy efficiency in buildings, especially town-owned buildings. With that, we did some exploring and evaluating of town buildings and explored possible opportunities for solar generation, electricity, especially in town buildings. One of the major first projects that we did anything about was when we explored the Council on Aging, very interesting building in that it's a building here in New England with all of our delightful weather, that we all know from this delightful last month or so, and designed to have a building that was designed for living in Florida. Did you know that? So somehow or other, it was found to not be terribly energy efficient. Surprise, surprise. So among other things, we discovered that the heat that was plowed in, because most of the folks there loved being in about 85 degrees in the middle of February, and all that heat was going straight up and straight through the ceiling right into the attic. So we discovered that it was having an incredible amount of energy going up through there. So with the help of one or two folks who kind of worked on these kinds of things in various places, we designed a new barrier that would go between that floor where all the activities are and the ceiling, and made it much more energy efficient. With the help of Bristol Plymouth, their students put this in place, and also the Pierce trustees who funded the materials that were put in. And with that, there was a significant improvement in the energy efficiency of that building. Then along came the Mass Department of Energy Resources, DOER it's called. And they had come up with a new initiative called Green Communities, which basically talks about having a community that is designed to focus on, especially on its town buildings, and making them hopefully far more energy efficient, and also work on anything involving alternative energy generation. There are 5 major components that it took to become a green community. Several of our neighbors became green communities. Lakeville is already a green community. Bridgewater, I believe it was, and a number of others, something like 60 or 70 at this point around the Commonwealth that are green communities. But we were not. And with that, we were shut out of being able to go after some grant funds. We had to go about working with town government and also with town meeting to adopt what's called a stretch code, which required new buildings being built, new homes being built to be more energy efficient in their initial design. We went about changing the zoning arrangements that exist in town, again needing town meeting to do this, that allowed what is called as of right settings for big solar arrays, that they didn't have to go through special committee approvals, that if they're in certain parts of the community, as long as you meet the requirements that the building department had, you can have these arrays if you have adequate land to do it in the right way. And a number of those kinds of things that came along. There was also a need to adopt a fuel-efficient vehicle. Now, Evan's taken that to another whole dimension with his electric cars. I'm a victim of his encouragement of electric cars, because I bought one too, or leased one actually, and enjoying it very much. So we did all these kinds of things. And with it, we met the requirements of being a green community. So we are in the very first year of being a green community. With that, we had an initial grant of about $190,000, something in that range. Is that right?
No, 197, 600.
197. No, but who's counting? So that's an initial grant, but after this, we will also be able to compete for other grants built around this whole process of trying to make our town buildings more efficient and hopefully avoid using as much fossil fuels in the generation of electricity that are used in town. So in addition to those green community activities, we continue to explore looking at alternative other generation systems. We're actually looking a little bit at hydro and at wind that may or may not be appropriate for Middleborough. We're checking those and doing a number of other things. We're also working with the gas and electric around the possibility of what's called community solar, and some of you might have seen, if you are Middleborough Gas and Electric folks, an option where you could add $5 to your bill and participate in what's called community solar, and I've done that, and I know a number of other folks have as well. And all that's going on. I tell you, the Green Energy Committee could not be anywhere near as successful as it has been without the help of a couple of folks. First of all, we do work with the Middleborough Gas and Electric closely, and Sandy Richter, who is their kind of community connection person, is a regular at our meetings, is very supportive and helps us understand some of the issues that we need to understand. And then the other is the town manager's office, especially Evan, has been incredibly helpful in helping us become more and more connected to what's out there. He's a wonderful researcher for grants and other things. So we're coming along with those kinds of things. So we continue to work towards the basic attempts to find ways to get energy into our community without having it from fossil fuel originally sources, and then also to improve energy efficiency. And I'm dressed in this funny way because I must leave at 4:15 to become a conductor down at Edaville. By the way, if you have anybody who's from 2 to 10, especially if they're what we call a Thomas the Tank Engine fanatic, you've got to come to Edaville. It's an experience you should not miss.
And also, just a quick note, Middleborough Gas and Electric wished that they could be here, but we caught them on a bad weekend where Sandy was busy in New Hampshire, I think, and Jackie was out of town. But if you have questions that are specific to Middleborough Gas and Electric, I will take them down and we'll connect you with them afterwards. So next, Kimberly, want to introduce yourself?
Sure. As Rich said, I'm Kimberly French. So I've been the leader, or one of the leaders of the climate justice team at the Unitarian Universalist Society here in Middleborough. And our focus has been primarily on two things. We've been working over the last 2 years: education and state legislative policy. Those aren't necessarily the only two things we're ever going to be interested in, but that's what we've focused on so far. We started out with a class, which was a fantastic experience. I would co-led it with Dan Hotchkiss, who is here. A number of people who took the class and have participated in our events are here. I'll mention them in a minute. But it was called Exploring the Web of Life, and we looked at our, religious and moral values and how that connected us to our place, where we live, our own homes, our town, our state, and our whole planet. And it was, I think it was a really, it was well attended. We had 20 to 25 people over 5 Saturdays, 2 to 3 hours each. And so and one thing we did was we sent out teams. We divided into 4 teams, and we looked at 4 areas for our town: energy, waste, food, and water. And we went out and we asked questions. So we went out to the GNE and to the water, the superintendent and other folks in town, and we tried to answer 2 questions. Where do the resources that we use right here come from, and how do they get to us? And who and what is harmed in that process, in what we use and the waste from those resources? And so we put together a database, and we sort of looked at this material and thought about it, and thought about what are the opportunities for us here locally? What can a small group of really committed, concerned people do here that would be effective? And that's the question we keep asking ourselves. And so we went out to a bunch of faith-based and statewide environmental organizations, went to their workshops, their meetings, talked to them on the phone, and what came back to us right away over last summer and fall is this year is the end of a 2-year state legislative cycle. What's happening at the state level is one of the most effective things that we can try to influence right now. In states like Massachusetts and California and some of the other Northeast states put into place, very forward-thinking climate policy, which we did back in 2008, and Senator Pacheco was the author of the Global Warming Solution Act. And there have been a number of acts since then. That can really have an effect on what industries do and what other states do across the country. So what we did was we said, well, we need to learn more, and we're still learning. So one of the first things we did was we had Mark Breslow, who was an economist who has written the legislation on carbon pricing, or market-based mechanism for controlling carbon. Very complicated economic stuff, but we partnered with Soul Homestead and Climate Exchange, which is a statewide group, and we hosted an event last fall out at Soul Farm and learned about that. And then we went to work and we started contacting our state representatives and legislators. Now, one of the reasons the statewide groups were really interested in us, and Jody Atkins-Perry, who's a member of town committee here, has been like my soulmate on this, and went out to a lot of these places, is because here in southeastern Massachusetts, we have a lot of state legislators who have not signed on to the climate bills and who have not co-sponsored them, not taken a stand one way or another. And so they thought, this is a real opportunity. These are people we're trying to reach. We don't know anybody in this area. So we said, we can take that on for this year, which ends at the end of July. And that's basically what we've been doing. I mean, we have one amazing, well, maybe more than one, but I mean, our senator is like an incredible environmental advocate, Senator Mark Pacheco, and has written a lot of these bills and is in some ways maybe out in front of, the people here in the constituency who maybe aren't demanding as much. We wanted to provide that demand and support for him. But we have, both Republican and Democratic House people in our town, who represent our town and the surrounding towns, and we wanted to work, to really reach out to them, because I don't think they have been really hearing a lot about it from people in their district. So we have gone repeatedly. We've gone to the State House. We just went last week, and I just want to mention, there are a number of people here who have gone. Jeff and Patty Simon, Alan Melchior, and Michael Rosine has been a support, as well as Dan and Doty. And we've taken groups up to the State House in November and in March. We've met with all of our legislators and their aides, and then we've also met with them in the district. We hosted a meeting with Senator Mark Pacheco at our church just before he was unveiling a big omnibus bill for clean energy, which is the main thing we're supporting right now. And the other thing I think that's happened, as we've met with Representative Gifford and Representative Oral repeatedly, we feel like we've really developed a relationship with them. They now know who we are. They know there are people that really care in their district. We found some common ground when we met with Representative Oral last week. We found 3 places we had common ground: no pipeline tax, coastal buyback, and more. And she said she'd be interested in helping us on grants for energy storage. So she doesn't maybe support everything, but I feel like we have a relationship started, and that's been kind of exciting. So the main bill is S2302, the Clean Energy Omnibus Bill, and it encompasses a lot of bills that have come up over the last couple of years in the House and the Senate. And I'd say two of the cornerstones, I can tell you more about it if you want later, but are the carbon pricing, or the market-based mechanism, which would be a way to put a price on carbon that would, in our ideal form, would then get rebated to everybody in the state and also and to businesses. But it would help, control the supply and demand of carbon that comes into the state. And then the other side of that has to happen is for the utilities, including the municipal ones, to increase their renewable energy that goes into their portfolio. Middleborough Gas and Electric, I think, has just about 50% right now. And the bills that are asking for a 3% increase per year, so we can meet targets that have been set in 2020, 2030, 2040, and 2050. And so those two things are the cornerstones, but the omnibus bill includes just a whole range of things, solar, hydro, wind, battery, environmental justice, getting rid no pipe fixing, gas infrastructure, and on and on. It's quite a bill. And so I just talked to Kyle Murray, who's Senator Pacheco's legislative aide, this week, and he said he expects it will come out of Senate House and Ways and Means within 2 weeks. And so the thing is, I think we just need to keep the pressure on, especially with the House, the representatives, to say when it gets to the House, constituents really want you to vote on this. So let's see. So the legislative system is going to end in July, and so what's next for us? And so one of the things that exciting things that I think we did, Jeff and I attended a workshop by the Mass Climate Action Network, which is organizing all of the municipal towns that are served by municipal electric plants. And that, I think, is a very exciting opportunity. The Green Energy Committee is doing a lot. We're thinking about, could it be good to have a grassroots group that also is going to the G&E board, which is a democratically elected, or maybe even serving on that board, and asking for things like increasing the renewable portfolio standard, getting more electrical vehicles among private citizens, and, promoting those. That could be kind of a fun activity. And I think they told me, we have in Middleborough Lakeville, I forgot to look at this number, but not that many, like what, maybe a dozen or 20 or something, or maybe even less in town. So we could increase the accessibility of, electric charging stations, and also make it possible for people to buy them at a reasonable cost. And then there's one other thing that there's a renewable energy trust fund. We are not part of that. If you put 0.005 cents per kilowatt hour on your bill, then we can get back lots and lots of money in state grants, and that's something we would like our G&E to be part of. And they wanted to do one on their own that would join with other municipals. I mean, I've been attending some of the Green Energy Committee meetings, and it seems like we could do both. We could get, there are lots of grants that we could be part of if we would be part of it, if we would be part of that trust fund. So that's another area where I think a grassroots group could go and talk to the board about it. So I'm just gonna, I hope I'm gonna see, I'm just gonna read, since we're a church group, I'm gonna read one little quote from Joanna Macy, who has inspired us so much. And she says, "The biggest gift you can give is to be absolutely present. And when you're worrying about whether you're being hopeful or hopeless or pessimistic or optimistic, who cares? The main thing is that you're showing up, that you're here, and that you're finding ever more capacity to love this world, because it will not be healed without that. And that is what is going to unleash our intelligence and our ingenuity and our solidarity for the healing of our world." Thank you, Joanna.
Oh, that was great. Thank you very much.
So I didn't bring an inspiring quote, and now, you know, I don't know what I was thinking. I'm back to follow now.
Kimberly has others.
Just let me cheat on the first. So, as Rich said, my name is Evan Malillo. I'm the assistant to the town manager, and I want to start off by saying thank you for the kind words over there. You know, Jeff doesn't get, I think, as much credit as he deserves for getting the town and the Green Energy Committee into the Green Communities Grant Program, which is $200,000 this year, and it'll be a couple hundred from here on out. So, kudos for doing that. He had to sit in front of every single town committee. And so then when it was my turn to do this chestnut thing, which we'll talk about, I just kind of followed his lead in doing that. So I didn't know I was going to go third. I hope everybody drank plenty of coffee. I just want to start a little bit of background. So I did get my environmental policy graduate certificate. And I actually started off that was going to be my degree. And I got a job with the town of Dartmouth. And they are, you know, just little town of Dartmouth, about the size of Middleborough, third largest, Middleborough second largest. And they, when I was with them, had the largest solar capacity of anywhere, Boston included. They were up in the 60 megawatts or so. And so that was really interesting for me. And then, you know, we embarked on an electric vehicle program while I was there. And I decided to get my degree in public administration and to do things this way. So fast forward to now, I want to highlight three main projects while I have everyone's attention. Okay, so as Rich also said, I'm very pleased to announce an even dozen plug-in vehicles. These average the equivalent of over 100 miles per gallon when using electricity. Middleborough double dipped and used both a state and a federal grant program to make that happen. The key detail is that all the vehicles are leased. Leasing was the only way to double dip and get the federal tax incentive. And it also allows the town to move on from older technology after 3 years. And in this realm, technology is just moving so quickly. And it has resulted in vehicles that ranged from free to nearly free. And in Middleborough, that was the what allowed that project to get through. The Middleborough Gas and Electric Department kicked off the program with a pair of Chevy Volts, that's a V, for meter reading. Next were 3 more Chevy Volts for the police, fire, and building departments, plus a Nissan Leaf for the Council on Aging. The free vehicle was a BMW i3, which went to the town's new health inspector. How about that for a good start? As technology improved, the town switched to the new Chevy Bolt with a B, which is rated for 238 miles of all-electric range. That's more than twice the range of all previously mentioned vehicles. And that's kind of an example of how quickly the technology is moving. These Bolts went to the health, park, housing, and building departments, and we also got a fleet vehicle to get rid of employee reimbursements. So even the employees drive around. So I just went to Ware, W-A-R-E, I didn't forget where I was going to, and back 200 miles on electric on its own. So the same state grant that funded the plug-in vehicles also funded the charging stations. And every single charging station was built solely with grant money. The town didn't spend 1 cent, again, an enabler for Middleborough. The majority of these stations are open to the public and can be found at the Affordable Housing Complex off of Benton Street, Town Hall off of Nickerson, and Jackson Street parking lot. The last two I mentioned, the Town Hall and Jackson Street, are set up with really thick poles so that they can hold a solar panel canopy, hopefully in the very near future. And that brings us to the final topic, solar. So in addition to the solar arrays above the charging stations, there's a project out to bid right now combining the roof of the Union Street School, where Massasoit is leasing, the Soul Farm Education Center, the Park Department, and a vacant cranberry bog, okay? And the bids are due this coming Monday, the 23rd, which also just happens to be Earth Day. We're not sure we're going to get a bid. Solar companies find Middleborough Gas and Electric's rules difficult to make work because they're so different from Eversource and NSTAR territory. But we're keeping our fingers crossed and we've got the right day, we think. Moving from a project we're not sure about to one we've just had a grant award this week and stole my thunder a little bit. Yes, no problem. $43,437 to build a dual-axis tracking system at the East Grove Water Treatment Plant, as well as a charging station to switch their meter reader from a large truck to a plug-in vehicle. Another project, as Rich alluded to, is at the Council on Aging, where we've awarded a solar developer to build a 100-kilowatt solar array and are expecting a return of over $1,000 a year on the electricity bill. The big project, which you might remember Rich Oakley here saving by asking for a recount at town meeting, which was just phenomenal, after my heart had just sunk, is for 1,400 kilowatts of solar. Okay, the town has only added about 8,000 kilowatts in total over the past 25 years. So this one solar array will add nearly 20% to the total in one fell swoop. The town will also be expecting nearly $50,000 per year for that project. So the town manager's office has been staying busy, and we hope to report the start of construction on all these projects sooner rather than later. Thank you, and let's open it up to questions.
Could I just do a very quick thing on Middleborough Gas and Electric? As I say, it worked close with the Green Energy, and they couldn't be here. But Andy Richter did suggest that if I could just very quickly give you a couple of things. They would suggest if you check their online site, go search under the energy savings. It gives you some of the ideas of the things that they do support for the community. Rebates for Energy Star appliances. They initiated, as we mentioned earlier, community solar. They encourage solar on homes and businesses, and there are some large arrays on some of the businesses in town. Lighting support to increase efficiency. Again, by say they encourage these things, they also in some cases have rebates on all this stuff. Energy saving tips for homes, and especially for heating and cooling. And they also have free home energy audits. So they do this in the wintertime when with a camera that shows where the heat is getting out of your house and all that kind of stuff. So all those kinds of things are the things that are available through the Middleborough Gas and Electric. They also did an interesting survey recently about what the community might see. 66.5% of the customers favor policies that reduce greenhouse gases and renewable energy expansion. 92.6% frequently intentionally take steps to conserve energy. Now those are of the responders. Okay, that doesn't mean everybody, but the people who responded. 71% believe in climate change. 50% willing to have their bill increased by up to $10 to reduce greenhouse gases. 53% approved raising bills in businesses and larger employers by 10% around having those extra funds being used for energy conservation and some of these initiatives. So there is also about 72% would approve adding a small charge for what is called smart energy incentives and projects. That's something, again, we refer to as a possibility for giving the gas and electric opportunities to do more of these energy environmental kind of connections. And they report that at this point, there are only 2.3% of homes in town that have solar. And those are the main points in the agenda. But gas and electric continues to work around alternative energy generation questions and issues. One of their complications is some of the limitations of their network, the interconnected support across the community sometimes limits some of the things they might be otherwise willing to do, because to bring the system up would be a major investment. So that's the latest one.
So let's get some questions. Yeah?
Well, I'm curious, nationwide, one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions is leakage from gas systems. I'm curious, I know nothing about where we stand on that. I would think the difference between what's pumped in and what's metered would be a pretty good measure. What do we know?
We are told that we have no leaks. When a leak develops, it is addressed immediately.
In the town, yeah.
In Middleborough and I guess Lakeville also.
Yes. So, yeah, during,
Well, that's obviously not true.
well, wait a minute, it's not that there aren't leaks, but they're, okay, at the, it's been a while.
We have old pipes running
Yes.
underneath the street.
And especially in the downtown area, and Jeannie, you may know more about this, have been replacing them, I mean, I
High
haven't.
pressure system.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, they're replacing
but
them
what,
because
I think what I was told is that at the end of the year, when they have to do their report, they keep on top of it, so that they are fixing the leaks as they go, is that correct?
Tell you that when I lived on Rock Street, they were fixing it for a long time. So
Okay.
that's what I know about, digging up the road. And I know that they're upgrading the system from low pressure to high pressure. So they are investing money in keeping and expanding their natural gas service. And you might know this figure better than I, but natural gas is how many times more detrimental than carbon? Is it 10 times? Is it 100 times?
Yeah, methane is worse, at least
Yeah.
short term than carbon dioxide.
Yep, so it's definitely a worry, and I don't know whether, my understanding is that they're replacing them for high pressure so that they can do more.
There's two pieces to it, which is replacing the old pipes,
Yes, of course.
the center, and then also is fixing the leaks as they're out in the field and trying to keep on top of it.
You know, like the one behind my stove, that kind of leak.
No, but that's,
Street.
what's that?
It leaks in the street.
Oh.
Street, yeah.
Oh, I see.
But this is in contrast to Boston and a whole lot of the older suburbs close in that have been actively, measurably leaking large amounts of gas for 30 years and up. And just are allowed to be that way because their infrastructure is so old. I mean, some of those lines are wooden, that, if they fix this one, there's gonna be another one pop out right next to it. But they have a huge problem and no incentive because there's nothing fining them in any way for releasing these large amounts of gas into the atmosphere.
I have a question regarding changing over from like a standard heating system to solar panels or converting your house. For older people, sometimes it becomes, can you get back the initial investment you placed on solar, say solar panels or solar units? And that, whether it should be or not, money becomes an issue about should you invest in these kinds of upgraded technology, but your window of gaining the money back, so to speak, might not be as long as a young couple who makes a lot of sense. I wondered, is that too general a question or too foolish a question to deal with?
No such thing as a foolish, of course they're foolish, that's not a foolish question. So I'm not a solar developer, but as somebody who's looking at panels on their own roof and not sure how long I'm gonna stay in that house, solar can be a 4 or 5 year return on investment. That's fantastic. That's one of the best things you can do, but, you know, how long are you gonna be able to recoup on that investment, especially if you maybe plan on moving? So what you would do then in that, so you can't do, so this is one of the things, you can't do a PPA, a power purchase agreement. The gas and electric won't let you buy solar at a lower rate like you can do in other territories. But you could lease the panels, you could take out a 20-year loan so that you are making money right away instead of, you know, waiting for the return on the investment. You could be making money over the whole life of it. And another way is you could participate in the community solar program, although the details are still being worked out. I believe they said it would be first year or two before you would start making money in the community solar program, which is quite different from the community solar program and investor-owned utility, Eversource.
I thought it was 12 months when I signed up, that it said you would be paying for 12 months.
Second, I think second or third year, you start having it actually, so it's going to end up with a little bit of money coming in, but it's also very limited. You can only, you know, your $5, you couldn't say, I want to buy $1,000 worth of community solar. They're only allowing you a small little piece of it, so that you can't do that. There are other things that are substantial issues around the idea of putting solar on your house that have been back and forth and up and down. Unfortunately, you'll see stuff that is sometimes called solar wrecks. Okay, now solar wrecks are basically the big electric companies and other things are required, legislatively required to have certain amounts of their electricity generated from alternative sources like solar. And they don't have big fields necessarily enough to generate that. So basically they buy rights when your house generates a certain amount of solar, and those are the solar wreck kind of pieces. And some of that stuff is changing. Variations are coming along, and what the state does and doesn't have on some of those kinds of things can be significant. There was a lot of interest in getting solar in place because it looked like solar wrecks were going to disappear. Well, now they're back for a while anyway, are they not?
I mean, there's been an extension on the extension of the extension, but this new administration has their own program. It's called the SMART program. Because Middleborough doesn't pay into some of the programs that we've been talking about, they are cutting us out, just like they have cut us out for wind and hydro and heat pumps and, you know, renewable heating systems and mass save and all these other programs. So to give you a simple answer, the big state incentive is expiring sometime in the summer. What happens after that is still being worked out. It's not going to be as generous as what's expiring for Middleborough. And so if I were you, I would call 3 different companies, get 3 different quotes, and yeah, they should be able to get you around that return on investment thing. You don't just have to buy it up front.
I got to run, everybody, I'm sorry, and thank you all for being here. One interesting little thing about sources is that when we analyze where Middleborough Gas and Electric gets much of its electricity, one of the biggest sources, other than fossil fuels, is nuclear, especially, guess where? Guess what's closing? And with it, you know, that's another piece to the whole.
I thought they were New Hampshire.
Seabrook.
Well, Seabrook is another.
Thank you, Joe.
Question back here?
Yeah, I just want to make a couple statements because I think it's important. And I know Jeff just left and I feel bad. But I want to point out when the stretch code first went into town meeting the first time, it was overwhelmingly defeated. And in fact, one member of the town meeting stood up and said it was a communist plot. So I voted for it just on that alone. I don't understand anything about it. But to Jeff's credit, Jeff went around and really sold it to the community. He would go anywhere, anytime, and have a conversation with anybody. And he did a nice job. And as a matter of fact, the first green energy grant is going, the vast majority is going to the elementary school complex. And we're going to redo the lighting to LEDs. And not only is that a project that needed to be done, but it's a project that the town would have had to pay for and would have had to use their own resources. The second big point I want to make is French. When talking about the candidates and things like that, you will have 2 different state representatives this year in Millville. Ms. Oral is not running, and Ms. Calder's not running. So both of those seats will be open, and I will tell you, from past experiences, if you meet with a group, that, you know, people want to do what you're asking them to do and be a part of that because they don't want people working against them. And I would really reach out to all the candidates and ask to meet with them and ask their feelings and their commitment. And I would also ask for a pledge because, you know, what you say in a group while you're running is one thing, but to make sure that they hold to it is no. And the last thing I want to say is just to Evan is, you know, there are very few people, you know, I've known ever since he came here, and we've had conversations on one. Evan is a great person to work with. There are very few people in town government who have consistently made their paycheck back to the town. And Evan has done that over and over again with the grants that he's done and the ability for the town. And so that's an unusual piece, and it doesn't happen. And I think Evan should be commended for that.
Question right here.
Yeah, Evan, in talking about the response to the RFP, you were saying that there were kind of different rules in Middleborough than with Eversource and stuff. And I just kind of, what are some of the differences, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Are we kind of behind the times, or are we, or GE more demanding?
Tread carefully here. Tread carefully here.
If you can do this in a politically correct way.
Yeah. So
Evan would be able to say it, but I can say we're behind the times.
But that is the question. Are we suffering because we haven't caught up?
It is just so vastly different because we're a political entity. We're, you know, our own little kingdom, and we're able to. The gas and electricity is kind of able to set its own rates. So, in some ways, yeah, how they do things is how the utilities did them, you know, 20, 30 years ago before they were deregulated. But I wouldn't say that that's really what's holding things up. So one of the issues, and I've spoken with the gas and electric board and department about this at length, been before them, is that they have this net metering program that's only 10 kilowatts, okay? And that is great for the gentleman who used to be over there that wanted to do some solar panels. But when you start to look at what the town wants to do, what businesses want to do, 10 kilowatts is a drop in the bucket and not worth bringing out people. So when you go above 10 kilowatts, what you're ending up doing is you're selling the electricity to the grid for 9.5 cents, and then you're buying it back for 15 cents. And that's not what I think most people imagine when they think of, hey, I'm going to do solar. When I flip on the light, I'm going to be using the solar from, you know, my own roof. And when you're an Eversource or many of these other ones, it goes up to 60 kilowatts. And then after that, you know, it's so they have in some ways very, very different programs, and that's not the only one, but that's kind of a good figure to
follow-up question.
Yeah.
What would it take for gas and electric to change their infrastructure to be able to do that?
That's not an infrastructure thing, that's just a rates and policy thing. So most recently, they changed their net metering program to be, in order to get the full amount that your electricity is worth, you had to have lights on in your refrigerator, or you had to be using it at the same exact moment, so it had to be coincident. And if you weren't home during the day, as many of us are not, and you're not using it, then it's sold to the grid at 9.6 cents. I think that's what it is for commercial. Anyways, it's less. And then when you get home at night, you're buying it at the full rate. And that's not, again, that's not how it is in Eversource territory. It is, you know, you have solar panels and they're putting out 13 cents, which is what it would be in Middleborough, and it doesn't matter, you know, whether you're there and using it at the exact same time or not. So that's a recent change that they made, and that's just policy.
So if I could play off that a little bit, so it sounds like the net metering policy is not super favorable compared to the larger power producers out there. But one other thing that I wanted to mention was, this is a really general question, I think that maybe you guys have noticed too. I drive around all sorts of places, and it seems like when you hit Middleborough state or town line, there's no more solar. I can probably name the houses around here that have solar on them, and we just heard, I think Jeff mentioned it, that 2% of
0.3.
homes or something like that have solar. So maybe generally speaking, or maybe really specific, why is that? Why don't we have solar on our homes here?
So Plymouth, which is the largest land-wise community, and Dartmouth, which is, I grew up in Plymouth, I worked in Dartmouth. Dartmouth is the third largest community. Both of those have over 60 megawatts of solar. Middleborough has 8 at the moment. So yeah, it's a little bit more spread out here, we'll say.
And actually, is that 8 megawatts total solar production, or is that
That's 8
residential
megawatts
rooftop?
solar.
So that's including these big fields we see near the state police,
Yes.
or?
Yep.
Okay, got it.
Yep.
And that's a private.
Each one of those are
company.
650 kilowatts, so those are pretty big fields, there's 3 of them. And what was the second part of that?
Oh, so I guess what I'm getting at is, it's not here, and I'm kind of looking at why. And for me, my wife and I were looking at possibly doing solar on our house, and we realized pretty quickly that it wasn't possible for us without the help of some of those mass solar loans to help you install it. Because I mean, they're
Yeah.
$20,000-$30,000 for even just a relatively
Yep,
small.
that sounds about right, $20,000-$30,000.
Yeah, right, and a tracker system, like the one that you guys got, I mean, we got quoted as residential people for something like 80 grand or something like that, for like a
Oh.
10 kilowatt tracker. But anyway, maybe
Like,
that's not
I can
typical.
pass the grant.
Yeah, but I guess like my point being, the initial access to money. I understand there's something about green communities in there possibly. Can you guys talk a little bit more about that? I might be wrong.
You want to start?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know about it.
Okay, so green communities is, and the way they phrased it, it kind of trips people up. So there's nothing to do with solar or wind, no energy producing in green communities, even though we joined that. So green communities is all about conservation, and the joke is they don't really care where the power's coming from, just conserve it. So, yeah, there are some other programs such as the Mass Loan, right, okay. There's Mass Save, which we're not a part of, and that's actually something that Kimberly French here touched on. The Renewable Energy Trust Fund, if the town were to join that, and that's a policy thing again, that would allow the town's people to be part of the Mass Save program, the Mass Solar Loan program, a lot of these things, and the fee for doing that is 0.0005. And the program that Jeff mentioned that they were talking about starting up is 0.001. So that's about twice as much to kind of recreate many of those same benefits.
Is that cents per kilowatt hour? Is that 0.001?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're talking about 1/10 of a cent for the gas and electrics, and then 5/100ths of a cent for the other one.
No, well, I mean, one thing I forgot to ask you, I don't know if either of you, Rich, is about, is there a sign-in sheet here? Because I feel like, this is something that we would like to, would like to think more about is, getting together a group, perhaps a Middleborough Climate Action Network group here, that would be a grassroots group, working specifically on these issues, and anyway, I just like to know who was interested in this sort of thing. And it might be, just knowing, when is this on the agenda, and when, getting more educated about it.
We're
gonna send around a
That's
sheet.
something that I think is important, just so people know. One of the frustrations that I have, especially with the GE, about 5 years ago, I was part of a revolt against the GE because of mismanagement. And in fact, the current manager of the GE is excellent in comparison to what happened before. And just so everyone knows, what had happened before was the chairman of the board and the manager were constantly malfeasance after malfeasance. One of the problems that we've had in having conversations with the town is the vast majority of people move here from someplace else. So we've all been Eversource or whatever the piece, and you think to yourself, well, the Genie is great because it's a lot less money than it used to be. And when there's a problem, things get fixed a lot quicker than anywhere else in the, around us. And so you sort of get that, well, okay, how bad can it be? Like I get a much better deal, and so for the people in Middleborough, no one really gets involved, especially with the Genie, until there's something to get involved with. And so that's the frustration. You really have to point out over and over to people what it could be and what can happen. And I think that's a piece that, and I've already had conversations with some people. I won't say who, I'll do it. And people are interested in running for GNE. I know there's people here who'd be more than happy to help and help in that process and do anything that we can to make that come true.
And I'm a believer that you don't have to have a large group. I mean, even,
Right,
even a few people, 5 people, going to a meeting, knowing what they want and just showing up. And that can be a very effective thing to do. And so that's what we like to look more into.
To Rich's point, can I just say, I am planning to run for Genie.
To clarify, I'm a 10-month resident of Middleborough, just moved in, and I moved into Oak Point, and I can't have solar panels at Oak Point. So,
Why can't you have
insurance.
And that's approaching 5% of the town's population right there.
So, but that aside, I understood that when I came. If I read you correctly, there's no financial incentive to put solar on your house if you can't have access to programs like Mass Save or the financing that goes with it. Plus, again, selling for 9 and paying 16. So there really isn't a super incentive for people in Middleborough to get solar.
So I would say, just to back up a second, that net metering program that they have, I would say somewhere between 7 and 10 kilowatts is about what somebody puts on their roof. That's about 20 or 30,000 you guys were looking at. And there is a net metering program, albeit a coincident one. There's a net metering program between 7 and 10. So there is an incentive out there to do solar. There are different developers that are willing to do different things. One of the people that we invited today was Glenn Maltese, who had Blue Dot Solar. He's a solar developer here in town. So there is the ability to do solar in town for residential, and I would, encourage you to go out there and do it. The thing that I was talking about where you have to sell for 9.5 cents and buy it back for the full rate, that's once you go above the 10 kilowatt. And as somebody who's looking at government buildings and such like that, that's a frustration for me. Not for you. But,
and I would like to say one thing about that. For people, there are a lot of people who can't put solar up. I mean, people who are tenants, people who don't have south or maybe west facing, roof lines or shade or whatever it is. There's many, many people who can't. And so that is one of the things that the community solar program, even though it's just very much in the beginning stages and just a drop in the bucket, if you support it for paying for the first year $5 a month, there are other ones in the works. This one, the one on Everett Street that's just started, is a very small one. There's a much bigger one. I forget where it is. Is it
off of Chestnut Street,
Chestnut.
1,400.
Yeah. So I mean, and those are things that if there's what the GNE has told me is if there is a big demand and it's subscribed very quickly, that will really give them an incentive to do more of those kinds of things, and that makes it something that is available to more people.
And also to open it up so more people can own more than just that initial small piece.
Question back here?
Yeah, Evan, Oak Point, they're not allowed to put them on mobile homes.
Okay.
manufactured homes do not have solar panels.
I'd like to talk to them, they've got tons of land out there.
Yeah.
Well, I know, that's,
You know, maybe they could do something like that, and, yeah.
Strategically, I wonder whether the best route for a community to increase its renewable percentage might be large projects anyway. Because then you have one set of electronics to control the interconnect.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, if everybody's got cars, right? There's no giant community project out there for people to get cars, but everybody's got one because it makes sense.
Well, but electric cars are a way to centralize the power and make it more efficient by centralizing it. That's the same, that's the analogy.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that, you know, if you could get it to make more sense and be easier to get at and everything else, and people would just go out on their own and get it, that, you know, in that sense, it would spread like wildfire. Now, I think it's gonna take like a combination of.
I'll just say, from my point of view, signing on to the $5 was way easier than thinking for another 10 minutes about my roof.
A question over here?
Yeah, I'm curious about the long game. I'm wondering if, one thing I just don't understand, I've lived here a long time, but what is the next generation thinking and learning about green energy? So if you're between the ages of 10 and 40 or you're attending the high school or the public school system, what's happening there? And what are the clubs doing? What are Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, Brownies doing? I mean, what's it like being young in this town now? What are you learning?
There is a great environmental group, they are a club. So I know they're very active. 2 science teachers run it. Mr. Harris is one of the people who run it. So I know that. I also know that there's lots of, as everyone knows, currently every freshman and sophomore are required to do community service as part of graduation. And a lot of them do community service based on environmental things within the tech. And also, if you belong to an honors group or in a lot of cases, a sports group, you're also required to do community service. So, if you be part of an honors group, you have to do 8 to 12 hours a year. And so we really try to make those pieces as part. And I would also add, before I forget, that there are things you can do immediately. For example, Melissa, do you have any ideas?
I'm fresh off the streets right now. I just came in from the messengers. I had some Boy Scouts come today. I have contacted people and a couple of people over at the high school. I've only had one high school student come out and help pick up, but I'd love to have more. And I have a sheet already filled out, typed up that I can just put their name to it, tell us how many hours they've come. I try to encourage young people to come out and help us because it's eye-opening, the stuff that was going on the side of the road. Especially today, we found lots of stuff. Route 28, after these restaurants, you drive past there today, you'll see tons of bags of stuff.
Any highlights? What are the weirdest items so far?
I pulled a pool, a child's pool out of the wetlands. We pulled out, it was a dead turtle carcass over there. Nothing really unusual. It's mostly just the standard cups and bottles, fishing line, the can holder for gluten things that I cut up. Only one needle today. That's good. But it is pretty bad.
So if people want to get involved in the Mess Movers, when is the next time you're doing it and how do they contact you?
We do it every 3rd Saturday every month.
Okay.
Well, not every month, April through October. We meet at the town hall parking lot every 3rd Saturday at 9 o'clock. And we pick up until 11:30. The next one, I think, is May 20th. I'm not sure exactly, 15th, something like that. That's the next pickup, 3rd Saturday. And we just meet at the town hall parking lot. I give you a for that. wrappers, we have gloves, we have everything we need. We just got a lot of donations this year from different companies, and we have wagons now, and things that are helping us make it much more efficient.
Well, thank you for doing that, that's great.
I just want to ask sort of the ignorant question, but, you know, basically, I've always heard, oh, middle gas and electric, you know, it's just superior in every way to have Middleborough Gas and Electric. And I don't know if you can make it sort of clear to a person who really doesn't know anything about this. Do you see Middleborough Gas and Electric remaining independent and, you know, because it seems to be a value that the town holds dear. And, I mean, is it realistic in this world?
For them to remain independent?
Independent and the way, you know, or do you see that they can go forward and make progress and remain, I mean, I don't know, is it, everything has become
Yeah.
globalized and large, and for old people like us, or me.
I mean, I don't see why not. They're a board, the only constant is change, right? They're just a board, that sets policy for them, so if the board composition were to change, their policy could.
So in other words, it can
could also
remain, you know, Middleborough Gas and Electric can yet embrace, you know, better
Oh,
policies.
yeah, I mean, there
So
are.
it's basically policies.
When Jeff and I were lobbying Gas and Electric to get this community solar program, we were giving them examples that other municipal light plants, MLP is what they call them, have done. And there are MLPs everywhere that have joined this renewable energy tax fund. There are, you know, some that are going over and above and beyond. So they come in all different shapes and sizes, and absolutely the Gas and Electric does a great job with its prices, with its service. I think the last time I looked at it, they were around the bottom third, so their rates were better than 2/3 of the municipal light plants, but not all of them. And there were other municipal light plants that had, more progressive, more renewables than that.
There's also a piece too, that we should say, it's not just progression of green energy fees. There's a piece of social justice too.
For us.
The G&E makes a considerable amount.
Right.
And the amount of money they make, Evan and I have had this conversation. I think it's very easy to say that they could not charge customers for the winter months and get by with the amount of money that they make.
Wow.
For,
I know that they've always done very well.
And so it always hasn't been a priority to make sure that people won't turn off. You know, it hasn't always been that way. And, you know, some people go kicking and screaming. And I would also add that it only takes 3 people on 5 members board to make change. So that, you know, it isn't that you have to have control of the entire board, you just need a majority of control.
Is there still a seat open? Or is that a
No,
full
all
board?
the-
No, they've filled it.
But every year they have, it's an election, and at least one seat comes up. There's some very good people on the board, please don't.
Yeah.
No, I know that, I just didn't know whether, you know, being independent was really part of the problem.
It's sort of, I think, what happens though, and
It can be.
you sit on a board and you're told things internally, and you don't, unless you ask a lot of questions and ask, okay, what can we do differently? But, you know, people don't like change. I mean,
No.
It's just a matter of fact.
Town departments especially.
It could be the best of both worlds, because there's no stockholders to have to be siphoning
That's
off
right.
profit. So, and there are a lot, you know, as you said, there's a lot of municipals in the state, and there's an organization, MCAM, that is very progressive and working in concert with one another. And one of the things I want to do is get very much involved with that organization, and, you know, we might even be able to create a local chapter of that right here, and learn what is possible, so we're not simply hearing from the management of G&E what's possible, but we also have alternate facts at our disposal.
Yeah. So one of the alternate facts I'll just mention really quickly, and this is something that Jeff, Green Energy Committee, asked me to look up. If we were to join the Renewable Energy Trust Fund, calculated out to, in total, $135,000 a year. That's, one person's salary.
Cost.
Yeah, the cost, total cost of the town is $135,000 per year at the current amount of electricity we're using. And that's not an insurmountable amount of money for an organization that's pulling in that much.
Again, being basically an outsider, except for the last 10 months, the changes that would need to take place to incorporate a lot of these changes would bring about a small rate increase or a rate increase of
Yeah, so,
0.05 cents.
and then the people that elect the board members will be up in arms if there's a rate increase.
We just had a rate increase.
I would maintain.
Did anybody notice it in January?
Yep.
Huh?
I mean, just because it was written on the bill.
Right, right.
For example, to join the piece that Evan's talking
Yep.
about, $135,000, they could do it without a rate increase. The amount of money they're making in profit each year.
You know what I mean? They could simultaneously lower their rate by 0.0005, incorporate the 0.0005.
So they're making money. What do they do with that money?
Look, I don't want to turn this into a bashing, that they do a lot of things.
No, I like
Okay.
I like Middleborough Gas and Electric, and I like the idea of it. I'm just trying to understand the concept of it. Because I never lived in a town that was a municipal lighting plant.
Yeah.
So what happens to the net income from MGE?
They spend it on infrastructure programs, on salaries, similar to, what the town.
They don't spend net income on salary. We're talking about profit, right?
I mean, I'm not sure that they're allowed to bring in profit.
Well, they can move it to other places.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
example, they pay to have the pension plan.
Right.
Which they didn't necessarily need to do.
Yeah.
They've also.
The OPEB thing, right? Every single municipality, every single one is, and they're fully funded or close to it.
Okay.
But then they.
I'm just curious as to how it all works, because I've never lived in a
But
community.
it's supporting legitimate costs as opposed to going in somebody's pocket.
Correct. No one is saying that.
No, I wasn't even trying to raise a hint that money is
I understand
going,
that.
whatever. I'm just trying to understand the concept of it and what resources
We don't
would
need
be
to,
available.
a good question was asked, an answer was coming, and now we're talking about whether we want to hear an answer. I'd like to hear.
Give the rest of the
Well,
answer.
I think what happens a lot of times is for example, Evan's completely right in the fact that they buy things that are for the G&E, okay? So, in a typical town may pay, a typical town department, for example,
Pick our DPW, yeah.
DPW will buy a dump truck, okay? Like every 7, 8 years. They essentially buy a dump truck every year. And
We
it's
have
like,
19 vehicles, 1990s or older at our DPW. Continue.
and so the G&E does not have the same. The G&E has relatively brand new vehicles.
And that's on their
I'm
website.
not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm pointing out that, again, for the same $135,000 at the top, maybe you take a truck that's 5 years old. That's all. And I don't think it's.
That's a management issue, and that's up to the election of the board.
Rich,
right?
does the
Yes.
money stay
Yeah,
in the
policy.
G&E, or can it go into other parts of the town budget?
The G&E contributes about $200,000 to the.
What do we call that?
We call that payment in lieu.
Yeah,
of
a
government
pilot.
match.
Right.
And so just so everyone knows, they did not pay the $200,000 for 5 years ago when there was that issue. And then they came out.
It was significantly increased at that
You
point.
paid the $200,000. They paid a very small amount of $25,000. And plus they utilized the idea of, for example, let's say that, again, the dump truck method, okay? So if they need 10 dump trucks, okay, and all are relatively new and they buy them, then they pass the other one over to the town. So the town's getting the oldest dump trucks. But, again, the question becomes, the towns are using that dump truck for another 5 or 6 years. Do you really need to buy it all the time when you could be a part of this program and, again, not raise rates for that? And so these are the things that.
So those are policy.
Policy.
Okay.
Right, yeah, I mean, it sounds like, what I'm hearing is that the MG&E serves two basic interests. One is keeping rates low, and the other is making sure its own staff is well supplied with capital equipment. And it seems to me that that's not the correct top two priorities. That the energy conservation and emissions ought to be on that list. Isn't that what we're talking about?
That's policy.
So I guess we have to elect the right people.
But I think maybe we do.
So I wanted to kind of cap off, we're getting close to the end, so I was, yeah,
No, since we're capping up,
Yeah.
just two housekeeping things. One, you'll learn about Democrats, much like churches, there are lots of food. Please eat and drink before you go, so that we don't all have to take this home. And secondly, it relates to, there's a couple of assignments up there for papers for people running for office. And you don't have to support them, it's just to get the people on the office. One's Mark Pacheco, so if you're interested, please sign before you leave. The other is Alan Crawley, and the other is Sarah Hewitt.
Monday night.
that's a good idea. So I wanted to just pose this question to you two. What's coming up that people in this group that might agree with what we're talking about today might lend some of their time and energy to on the state and on the town level? And how do they do that? I'm wondering if I can just, whoever wants to start.
I'll go first because I think mine is fairly sparse. I mean, we've had Rich to save that giant solar field last time. I don't think we have too much on the ballot this time,
Which is Monday, town meeting.
which is Monday
Yeah.
for
Where?
green energy.
High school at 7 PM.
Yep.
How much time?
Special and then a regular time.
What time?
7 o'clock.
So she's got a lot though.
I do have a, well,
Go ahead.
let's see, so one thing is to continue to follow the clean energy omnibus bill through the rest of the legislative cycle. Make sure it gets out of Ways and Means, passes the Senate, and then the really key thing is whether it can pass the House and keeping the pressure on our representatives who will still be voting through the end of the session. And we have, I have a Google group, and if you signed in, I'll put you on it. You can opt out if you want, but we'll keep you abreast of that. I mean, some of the groups are making like Monday calls. It takes a minute just to call and say, I support this bill, I'm a constituent. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is what we've touched on, what Doty's interested in, I'm interested in, Jeff, and maybe others here, which is that is the possibility of starting a group here that would be a Middleborough Climate Action Network, maybe a chapter of MTAN, that would be part of this larger organizing group that looks at towns with municipal light plants and what can you do. There are a lot of towns like Concord and Sterling and Princeton that have done incredible things. I mean, hiring sustainability managers in their town, putting up a battery storage plant in the town. So there's lots of things that we could be helping move our electric plant to do. And I think being part of this larger campaign that has paid organizers to help you do it would be a great way. And the problem doesn't have to be going to meetings all the time. I mean, it could just be being on the list, this is when we're showing up, this is what we need to know, and being that. So those are a couple things.
And just as a public official, without that grassroots nudge, a lot of these things don't happen. Without the Green Energy Committee asking me to study wind, study solar, study hydro for the town, all these things, like they don't get studied. That's the enabler.
Let me just say one more thing. So one of the statewide organizers said that one of the reasons the climate bills haven't passed in previous sessions of the state is because the legislators say, oh, well, we're not hearing from our constituents. And he said, we are not going to let that be an excuse this time. So that's why, it feels like you call every week, it feels like, oh, this feels so redundant and what am I really accomplishing? But there are people across the state who are doing this. It's organized, and I think that is really critical. And I'll just say one more little thing, which is that the Community Preservation Committee, which I'm part of, is actually leveraged about, I think we're trying 10 to 12 million in grants also coming into our town, and we'll be to show up at town meeting. We have a couple of warrant articles tomorrow, Monday night also.
For the Oliver Mill Park?
Actually, the two we have this time are roofing for senior housing and restoration in the cemetery. So those are our main two this time. We've done.
So two things. I think I'd like to continue this kind of dialogue, but maybe not the exact same format. So we got a bunch of emails I think what I want to do is I'll send around an email after this with everyone on it, and maybe we can start some dialogue that way, and I'll, also connect you with Kimberly's Google group if you're interested. But then the second thing, and this is a little self-serving, but not really, is I'm also part of the Middleborough Conservation Commission. We also have an article coming up at town meeting that we expect may actually have some pushback, which is there's a piece of land at the north of Middleborough. People know it as Lion's Head or Murdoch Street or the Jagarjian property. Yep. And so we got a grant. The owner wants to sell it to us. We want to buy it. Everything was working out fine, and then we realized that the land is so old that the title can't be cleared. We paid someone $10,000 to go back almost 300 years to see if we could get clear title. So the only legal option left for us is eminent domain. Friendly eminent domain. It's a scary word, but we're paying for it. The owner wants us to have it. And so it's a really sensitive piece of land along the Nemasket River. It sounds like the owner's heir wants to build apartments and develop the area. The owner doesn't want that to happen. So everyone involved is very motivated. The neighbors will actually gain a slight amount of land and clear title to their own land in the process. So if you like the sound of that, I'd be happy to talk to you more after.
What number articles?
I don't know. But Tricia Cassidy, the conservation agent, will be getting up and speaking about it. If I feel like there's a need, I'll jump up too. So you'll know when it's coming.
So my one piece of advice, I think the Middleborough town meeting is the most uninformative forum I've ever attended. And the towns that I've lived in before always come with a little report on each article to tell you what it's about, what they're asking you to vote on. I would make sure that there is some explanation, whether it's you or the agent, because I'm really sick and tired of being asked to vote on articles where there's no explanation, and particularly ones where it refers to some piece of property that, people who've lived in the town for 100 years might know about, but the rest of us.
Who does a great job with the explanations is, last time I noticed the capital planning group stood up and explained exactly what it was for, and I thought that was great.
When the high school vote was
right.
Up, but I mean, there are major multiple $100,000 items every meeting, and all you get is selectmen approved, finance board approved, and no explanation of what.
Town council doesn't like us to write about the articles more than what you see. So sometimes
you can do it
we'll
orally
send
in the
in a pig and, get back like a little
That's
slice.
why God gave us point of information.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to stand up for every article and say, is somebody going to explain this before we vote?
Right, and
But
sometimes
5
they
or
do,
6
sometimes
people
they
can
don't.
do it.
Yeah. Anyways.
I used to be moderator
Be
in
prepared is my
Bridgewater,
suggestion.
so I understand that.
Yeah, I have the same frustration here.
So I guess just thank you very much for coming. Thank you to the panelists for coming. You guys have been great. And let's see.
Thank you for having me. My family limits the amount of time they want to talk to me about green energy.